Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hi, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, and today is the fourth season. I'm so excited. Who would have known? Who knows your steps? It is Aries. Yesterday was the equinox. That's one of our timing cycles that we're going to talk about. And coming up this week, too, is the Venus Star Point in Aries. What is that? Well, it's an amazing heartbeat, a kiss between the sun and the earth, a connection of that really is like a backdrop. And we'll discuss that too in further detail. So just trying to explain a little bit about the equinox. It's a moment that happens twice a year where the light is balanced between the northern and the southern hemispheres. Don't mind my hand. I might be going in the opposite direction of north and south here. Maybe I'm down under, right? Looking up. But the point is that in that moment, and it has a lot to do with the seasons, and we could say, as one I just read about an astrologer, that it is a moment where when you spring north or fall south, which I thought was very catchy because really right now we're in the springtime above the equator and it's the fall below the equator. And that's a concept that astrologers are really beginning to try to comprehend and work with how we speak in metaphors because our association is so different. Hey, I think somebody answered that they like that idea. Okay, so a Venus Star Point, it's a cycle of 100 years. They go in reverse like our nodes. And there's always 5 at a time in that 100-year cycle. It seems complex. It has its pattern, but it's a perfect pattern. And therefore it has the characteristics of the mean, what's it called? The perfect mean, the Fibonacci, the golden mean. Thank you. The golden mean, Da Vinci, his hands, his arms sticking out. And in a sense, the star pattern is very connected with that, where there's a head, 2 hands, and feet. So right now we're going to be dealing with the Aries Venus Star Point, along with some of the others because they all relate. Okay, so tonight or today, wherever you are on the universe, we are bringing 2 wonderful panelists that have been with us before. There is Ray Sapp. I see her bright smile. So Mountain Astrologer magazine, she now owns that magazine and taking the reins from Tem. It's really an exciting new venture going forward. And Ray Sapp, as I said, is the publisher of the Mountain Astrologer magazine, and it keeps us together as astrologers around the globe. And she's a 2nd-generation astrologer, prefers the name Astromancer, a witch holding space for sacred language play. And her mother helped, as my mother, get this language down. And so as we are always feeding other people, who knows, maybe this will be the trend of times again. We never know these things until later. And I'm a little bit rusty at this because we've been doing automatic ones, but it's important. And you can always find out the astrologer if you go to Talk Cosmos, or just check out the Mountain Astrologer for Ray. And so she's been professionally a practitioner since 2017, has a BA in Recreation Management and English Language from California Polytech State University at San Luis Obispo. I was just through there. Great area. And passionate about psychohorology, sexology, neurology. I don't think I'm saying these right, but at any rate, it's very exciting. And the whichwaycafe.com. So hi, Ray. It's great to have you. And
Hi,
Jeff
Sue.
Gronland. Yes, hi. And Jeff Gronland of the OPA magazine, among other things. But OPA is organization for professional astrology. It's really a wonderful site to also connect with about astrology, because you don't have to be professional yet. You can have that as your pathway and they help you. But it is with that idea that we are a profession. And so for Jeff Gronland, his interest developed at 17, again, a lifetime, studying old esoteric books from Hometown University Library, and venturing through myriad of paths leading to professional astrology consultations in 2014. He became a certified evolutionary astrologer through Maurice Fernandez, which we are all students of, very wonderfully, to give, who is evolutionary astrology, and graduated in 2017. He's a board member and community outreach director for the organization of four, I should have my pronouns right, Professional Astrology, OPA, an international astrology organization with satellites in 13 countries, if I have that right. He's a father, thinker, photographer, editor, and he lives in rural Maine. Now, Ray is in California and I'm in Hawaii. So we spread a little bit the distance once again, and in our thoughts we connect. So hello, Jeff. It's so great to see you again.
Hi, Sue.
And interestingly, as we will start, I listened to OPA today as I am a member. It's very reasonable. And every month they have a great talk, a lecture, not a conversation like this. We never know quite where we're going. We have the threads, but we create our own product. And I listened to Ariel. And so as I begin each session, we come up with something that resonates in our heart about this whole subject. So I will start it off, and I will say that what really interests me is the idea that this heartbeat that has representation to how we connect to the world and how we see beauty and form and the meaningfulness of our values, because it's Venus, remember, with our ego of the sun, with the manifestation through the earth for groundedness, planting this, that we are really in a dialogue progressively with our values historically through the generations. It's not just now. There's an interconnection between the current heartbeats, you might say, that are vibrating in the background, that are in a relationship that isn't always easy to synthesize. So that's just an eye opener. It's there, and it can go way back and forward. Okay, so Ray, I know you said you had something that you were thinking about. What might you add?
Yes, what I wanted to share today, mostly on the essence of Aries, and something I feel like isn't always talked about with this archetype. But so it's from post-Taoist philosopher Xenevere Tao. And so it says, the post-Taoist notion of the true yang is abject vulnerability. When one is at their most yang state, they're actually in a world of total unknowing and absolute vulnerability. And so I feel like with Aries, it being the first sign of the natural zodiac, and again, it's so entwined with this notion of the warrior that we kind of forget that vulnerable roots and how primal Aries is. And in particular, I think in this day and age, we need to embrace radical vulnerability and what it means to reach out and just embrace one another as humans, as animals of the earth. So.
Radical, vulnerable. That's an imprinted. Thank you. And Jeff, what might you throw into the pot here?
Yeah, Ray, that's beautiful. It's a really fantastic perception and an interesting passage about Taoism and the Yang. I don't have anything prepared necessarily, but I just wanted to just yesterday I was reviewing the Venus Star Points from last year and this year, as well as some other things, and noticed how potent and I know that we will be talking about this as we go along here in the next hour, 45 minutes to an hour. But last June was a Venus star point in Gemini, and I'm not going to bore you with all the specifics, how many of these connections that I found in between last year's Venus star point and this year's Venus star point in 5 days here. But needless to say, the connections were primarily focused around Mercury, Gemini, and Aries, Mars, and the nodes. And these are, not to mention the sun, of course, because they're both Venus star points and Venus, but the connections beyond the sun-Venus conjunctions, the Venus star points, was Mars and Gemini. Gemini being the north node this year at 13 degrees, Mars conjunct that. And so anyway, the connection to me is predominantly about communication, about angst, about activism and vocal activism, so I think that we can all, it goes without saying how vocally active so many people have been, and how much things have been that intense over the past number of years, especially the last year and a half, with so much as what's gone down socially, culturally, globally, collectively. So, yeah.
This is ideal. I love that factor because we are in the nodes of Gemini and Sag, and communication is really an in-depth study. I'm just because of the commonality through COVID, it seems that these nodes, the intensity that we're experiencing them, it has really exponentially a learning experience for everybody. So communication and social activism. Yes. When I think about that and the vulnerability that comes up with that, and the fact that we're dealing with all these, everybody's in the stage somehow, even if they're not, because through COVID, we've had the elders and the young that have been somewhere in our hearts, that the people that are navigating this new world that we're going into, have them deep somewhere in their hearts. I mean, they may not be online or something, but they're part of this story and how they're feeling. So thank you. Always so exciting. Well, the vernal equinox, which we realize that there's only 5 days between the charts. So really, essentially, it's the personal planets that are moving, and only looking at the equinox because it is often considered to be that seed point. It's the very beginning, the AP, the Aries point, as astrology realizes, the whole archetypal idea that you're breaking forth for an identity. So we might have something to say of it. And personally, what I'm seeing is that in that chart, because we do want to go into the bi-wheel, and particularly with the Venus. But first of all, the two rulers we're talking about, the Gemini, of the nodes, Mercury squares Mars, which is by orb conjunct the nodes. So again, I guess that really goes back, doesn't it, into what you're saying, Jeff, about this social impetus that isn't going to stop. I mean, it's in Pisces too.
No, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. And it's what I love about what Ray said is that what came to me while you were speaking just moments ago, Sue, is that the speaking out, the vocal activism that we've all seen, especially over the past year and a half, with Black Lives Matter and plenty of other things, literally plenty, is speaking out and being vocal about what you believe in, standing up for what you believe in, can really, that automatically makes you a target for criticism and attack. So you're being very vulnerable by speaking out and taking that initiative, which is, as you said, Ray, the vulnerable side of being completely yang, which is very much so Aries. So with the Gemini there, with how much Gemini, the North Node, where we're heading, it's taking us where we need to be, and you can kind of see that very, very potently. It's so good to zoom out so you can see what's really happening astrologically.
Absolutely. I like what you had mentioned, Jeff, of how, again, this Venus star point, which is going to be at 5 degrees of Aries, but it's ruled by Mars in Gemini, conjunct the North Node, which, as you mentioned, at 13 degrees, which last year the Venus star point was at 13 degrees of Gemini. But so even Caroline Casey, she talks about how the 3 signs of the Venus heliacal rise, like the most common in the last, I'm going to botch the numbers, but I feel like the last 100 years, the most common 3 signs of the Venus heliacal rise, so as she comes out from her conjunction, has been Scorpio, Aries, and Gemini, and how Scorpio is the reemergence of the snaky feminine. Aries star point is about the reemergence of feminine leadership. And then the Gemini is about the reemergence of the power of our voice. And so I feel like, again, particularly right now with the Venus Aries star point being ruled by Mars and Gemini, it is like, how do we bring our voice to the table? And how do we do it in a way that is honestly vulnerable? And again, fighting for the voices that can't be heard, or fighting to create a space in which all voices have a place to be heard.
This really is a special way of denoting it, which Caroline Casey is, just for those that may not be aware, a brilliantly out of the box perception. But the vulnerability, I'm realizing, isn't that where the heart comes in? So these Venus star points really are, although they may not be so obvious to a lot of, there's many factors of how to look at astrology, but it has been Ariel Gutman, in her book, The Venus Star Rising, has, since I think she published it in 2011 or something, has become more in our consciousness of this energy happening. And so because they go retrograde. So this is the second to the last of the Aries, and they started back as a pair. So when you bring up Aries and Scorpio, they're a pair. They came in during the 20s. That's 1920s, 100 years ago, and they're just fading out. In fact, since they're going backwards, it'll, I think in 2022, I read that Scorpio is leaving and then it'll be Libra, which will be a hugely difference. So there's so much more to talk about than that, because right now we go ahead, Jeff. I hear.
Well, I was just going to say that first of all, a huge shout out to Ariel Goodman for her really beautiful book, super interesting material and very worthy, Venus Star Rising. But she does mention about how we're coming to the end of the Aries and the Gemini, and we're moving to, is it Gemini? No, Aries and Scorpio. And we're moving to the Libra and the Pisces. And the Aries star point is going to move to the Pisces, and the Scorpio is going to move down to the Libra. And that brings a little bit more of a desire for being harmonious, working together as bringing collective. What Libra is seeing both sides and understanding both sides and being, and then the Pisces brings the compassion and honestly, it's kind of is the pre-vulnerability. It's going back into the womb and feeling that all is one. We can all connect and get together and get along. And so hopefully the intensity of the Scorpio Aries moving to the Libra Pisces can bring a little more, after all this whole cycle of the Aries star point from 1929 until for another 3 more years left here, has really, if you think about what's happened in that 100 years, it's just astonishing to see how much kind of serious angst on a global level happened.
It is.
And how just kind of brutal it has gotten, and not to go down the rabbit hole of the negative, but it really has been such a huge factor in the last 100 years. And to see the potential to try to, again, zoom out and see the potential for the compassion and the working together that we could find ourselves in the next 10 years, we can always be hopeful. And I really feel like this, the heart centered of the Venus Star Point can really help get us there, hopefully.
Absolutely, because she does bring out a lot of this idea that that tango between those two energies of initiating your own self-discovery and then deepening the powers of wanting to know why and the emotions and whatnot has a positive, but it's also been a bit of who is the power for? Is it for me or we? And so what you're saying is it's going to shift over to the we more. Well, looking at the Venus Star Point chart itself,
Real quick, before we jump into that, I think everything you guys just said is bringing this to my attention. But so the way in which Aries relates to Scorpio and also its opposition Libra is that, if we talk about the snaky feminine of Scorpio, in Asian traditions, the ruler of Libra was actually the dragon. And so again, I always like to say the scales of justice or the scales of the dragon. And I like to lean towards the scales of the dragon. But in particular, that the Aries Libra axis, we are so kind of cultured in, modern Westernism that, you slay the dragon, but that actually the lesson of this axis is to befriend the dragon. And so again, it's not to tame, it's not to own or slay or kill, but we learn to befriend the dragon in all of us. And that being a very feminine thing too, of like, we aren't supposed to suppress the feminine. We aren't supposed to conquer the feminine. Like, we are supposed to engage it and embrace.
Beautiful, Ray. Beautiful. Yeah.
It's a lot like the martial arts, where instead of force against force, you use that force of the nature of the other to deflect or to develop something. Yeah. In fact, I'm taking a class from Alan Clay, who I think you both know from New Zealand, who wrote Sedna, and it's about Ixion, the lawless one. But he also wrote a manual about clowns, which he says Ixion is a perfect example for. But again, he was saying that for clowns, that nothing is unused. It's like a total resource compost. And this is my way of saying it, because everything you take in can be used, like I was saying with the martial arts, to recreate. Because the idea is that you laugh eventually at oneself, I guess. So pardon me for that tangent. But you know what? Yeah, the heart, when you think about it, that's what we need, is a little laughter, don't we? Because it can get pretty serious about when you think about the war or the negative or the shadow side of all this that we're talking about. And where does Venus come in? Because Venus too has her heritage of being morning star, night star, and or evening, as they call it, and can be the goddess of love or warrior, because love sometimes isn't always like, oh, you're so sweet. It's like, I want that, because I
yeah, love isn't easy.
No. So we have to laugh.
Yeah. And there's the Gemini too. There's the humor, the kind of the wit and the let's not take this so seriously, and I was also just thinking too about the Aries Scorpio. And Ray, I love the femininity that you're bringing into these. I really do, because it has been ingrained in us, even as evolved astrologers, if you will, or whatever. That the masculinity of Mars, the masculinity of Aries and Scorpio, but there is so much femininity to them, and I appreciate you awakening us to that. That's awesome.
Good, exact, yes, exact. It's. Go ahead.
Scorpio and Aries are both ruled by Mars. And, the fact that those two are switching to Libra and Pisces, we're going to the Venus and the traditionally Jupiter, and modern Neptune, very much more, traditionally speaking, much more benevolence than malevolence. But I don't tend to really like to go to the good and evil side of these things. But
there
nevertheless,
is shadow. Yeah,
there is
shadow. And so go ahead.
I'm so sorry, rambling. But what's fascinating too is that Pisces and Libra are in Antisha. It is a balance factor there that's even stronger than not than just the Libra fact, is that they're they have the same sunrise sunset each at that time of year and stuff.
Yeah, and to tell people a little bit, Antisha, which is not a simple thing. Richard Smoot has a great, whether it's through Esar, or I think Opa has it. If you just go into it's one of the blogs that has been posted. But Antisha is where, as you said, in that sense, but yet the shadow of one is seen in the other. They have this amazing relationship. So it's really a valuable thing. Boy, my threads of thought are just like hanging in thoughts.
And even again, the Aries Libra axis, the Libra is the yang face of Venus, it's a yang sign. And so I always actually see it as, it is the youthful yang of Aries actually coming into court. And it's where, it kind of softens itself and it puts up its tail feathers and it's like, ooh, I'm going to show off in court and attract the ladies. And even again, kind of tie into that idea of we befriend the dragon rather than slay the dragon. It is kind of like we see Saturn being exalted in Libra. Mars going to Libra is a actually maturation process. And, we might use the word softening, but it is Mars learning how to curb those more primal aspects where it's just instinctive reaction to how do I embrace the other? How do I see myself reflected in the other?
Oh, perfecto.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And really kind of getting the selfishness out, quelling and learning about how you've been so selfish. You got to put that down and get over yourself and merge with the other.
Well, and so often recognizing that our selfish desires are actually to then compromise with another. So much of our selfish drive is that we want to embrace others. And so we have to learn, like you said, how do I temper that so that
we're going to have to take a break, but it is that mirror. It is so true. And it's a two-way street. Absolutely. And it's how much ownership and whatnot. Thank you. This is the 4th season, starting with Jeff Gronlin and Ray Sapp. And today is just after the equinox of March 21st. We'll be right back. Thank you.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Aries. By leaving a cycle based upon completion, the energy of Aries sparks initiation, creating action to separate into a new cycle of life. It's a fire sign, which means it will involve great emotion. And because separation may create resistance, it also takes great courage to break away to new ways of becoming.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Hello, my name is John Talevich. I'm a chiropractic doctor, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we understand how to implement our free will through the cosmos.
Easy on the ears, good for the soul. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi, here we are again, and we're talking about the Aries Venus Star Point, that Cazimi point that's going to be on March 26th. And I think I have a time here somewhere. Yes, it's going to be at 2:57. We can round out to 2:58 on Eastern time, and then on the west side of the coast.
AM.
Yeah, it'll be. Do I have that right? Yeah. Okay. So that's where it is. So we can figure that out. And I am with Ray Sapp, Mountain Astrologer Magazine, and Jeff Gronland of Organization of Professional Astrology. And so I think going into this relationship with the last year Venus Star Point would be very exciting, because just to recap before we do that, I was noticing that this particular, well, we can bring it up too, the relationships between Mars and Mercury. And then at some point, if we can tie it in a little bit to the United States, but we'll see, because we can always do that for another talk. Okay, that Venus Star Point from last, because this one's at 5 degrees Aries, almost 6 degrees, 5 and 50 minutes. But last year's was 13 degrees Gemini, and it's still in the picture, folks. It's like it goes clockwise. So now Gemini is going up to be the head, and Aries is going to go over to the one of the arms. So it's a relationship. No, Gemini is going to go over to the arms. Yeah, thank you. Meaning that, okay, Jeff, you had lots of thoughts about this. I know. I thought.
What? I don't know if I had lots of thoughts. I had lots of notice. I noticed a lot on the chart. I didn't necessarily delineate a lot of thoughts out of it, but
That's okay.
one thing I definitely think is super fascinating, and I would like to research whether this happens regularly. I might reach out to Ariel and ask her if she's already discovered this, so I can save myself some time. But the Venus Star Point last June, on June 3rd last year, Sun and Venus were conjunct at 13 degrees Gemini. And the Venus Star Point that happens next Friday on March 26th, Mars is conjunct the North Node at 13 degrees Gemini. So we have this really fascinating, relationship between last year's Venus Star Point and this year's Venus Star Point, because the ruler of this year's Venus Star Point, Sun conjunct Venus in Aries, the ruler of Aries, the dispositor is Mars in Gemini. So that's why I talked about it earlier. No need to rehash that, but definitely the connection between the Venus, all the inner planets, really, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Sun, Earth. No sense talking about the moon, but anyway, really fascinating how they all really are connected between last year's and this year's star points.
And indeed, in that bi-wheel, because folks, what we're doing is June 3rd, 2020 at 1:42 p.m. in Eastern side. That's the coast. And the 2021 that's coming up on March 26th at 2:43 Eastern. And we're doing Eastern. A lot of people are there, and you got to choose one side versus the other. So there we go. And the capital's there, etc. So, but the chart's still the same. I mean, just looking at the energies. And here we have these two. If Gemini rules, the Gemini one. I mean, if Mercury rules, thank you. Yeah, the Gemini one, and Mars rules they're conjunct. They're both at 15, and they're also in Pisces. It's just incredible.
And that's
and
the
square the
additional thing.
nodes. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, so the fact that the ruler of last year's Venus Star Point and this year's Mars conjunct the North Node is Mercury, conjunct last year's Mars. Yeah, For all your radio listeners, I'm sure you're following all this beautifully.
I know, but essentially, we know that when you delineate that Aries and Gemini can be the most talkative in many ways, along with, I think, Pisces. But here we have it. So it's like, how are we going to make these conversations? I know we've talked about the vulnerability. It's also about the heart-centered ability to use information. Or what are you thinking, Ray?
Let's say on that vulnerability note, particularly as we tie it into Mars being in Gemini, like we mentioned earlier, the vulnerability of using your voice, but also it's about the risk of using your voice. We talked about how, what the Aries and Scorpio star point started in 1929, and us looking at what has happened in the last 100 years since then, of the degree of which we have the power to use our voice now. Not that it doesn't come with its own risks, I would say much different risks in modern day versus 1930. But when we just think about that principle itself of what capacity of risk is involved when you speak your truth, what depth of vulnerability do you have to reach in yourself in order to speak your truth and feel safe speaking your truth.
I'm looking at the United States chart, and I didn't send that as a chart to you folks, but for the Sibley chart for our audience, that's at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, 1776, July 4th, when the United States declared independence. And in that chart, 12 degrees Sagittarius is the rising, meaning the descendant is 12 degrees Gemini, and that's exactly where all this is happening. So, and it also is in between, you could say almost like a midpoint. If we take the degrees, that's what it means between any 2 points. Between our natal Uranus at 8 Gemini and our Mars at 21 Gemini, all mutable, all seeing polarity points, because if we go into the whole idea of what Gemini is, which everything has its depths, but if nothing else, it had the twins, one mortal, one immortal. So it's like how spirit and matter connect and finding that. But it's also
it's
polarity.
About diversity and variety. And so with Mars and the North Node both being in Gemini on the descendant of the US chart, again, this conversation we're having about how to use our voice and what voices get to be heard, something that's, an apt for conversation right now that's up is, cancel culture or things like censorship. And whether we agree or disagree or where we're at on that spectrum, these are important conversations to be had about, again, whose voice is included, whose have been excluded, and for how long. Even as, we revere written word, I love books, but who has had the power to publish? Who has had the power to have access to language itself? When we look at the history of illiteracy in our country, it's all things that ought to be brought to the table in this, conversation for the United States, if not the greater globe.
Beautifully put, Ray.
Yeah, illiteracy. Super. Yeah, these ring. They just echo in my heart. And inclusion rather than exclusion. to realize, therefore, it takes, because there is, again, maybe this is back to the heart of Venus. One needs to get out of the intellect to really feel, to connect, like feel like in the water signs, or feel like the fire of
I was going to say,
energy.
I feel like Aries, that vulnerability, that very primal aspect, that Aries is actually a very emotional sign. It's a very feeling sign. It's the gut. It's where, that first, instinct, if you will.
Passion.
Yes. Which, has its own detriments in ways, but it's that punch, it's the force we need to push through things.
Yeah, like the little seedling often said, it's bursting out of the earth. It takes a lot of energy. That's right.
We've really been pushing forth with that kind of that passion and that desire and that, act before you think kind of, trait, if you will, as a collective for a long time. It really does show itself, in my opinion. And Ray, when you were speaking earlier, just a moment ago, I wanted to just add to that how, like, the illiteracy, who's had the power to be published. Clearly a lot more men have been able to be published than women, and minorities have, the illiteracy rate is so much higher amongst minorities, of course. But at the same time, despite the fact that there are still all these, losing the word, not finding the word, but these things that aren't fair, I can't find the word.
Injustices.
Thank you. These injustices.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Thank you. Despite all these injustices, how many injustices there still are, and there are plenty. But if you look at how far we've come in those nearly 100 years, from 1929, women, like, nobody wanted to admit that they were gay. Women couldn't vote. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so these kinds of things, we have made a lot of ground. And of course you do throughout history, no matter what, regardless of Venus star points, perhaps. But the fact that these two arms, Aries, Scorpio, are only 2 out of the 5 arms that we've had for a long time now, Capricorn, Leo, and Gemini. Yeah. Interesting combination of signs. But anyway, I just wanted to add that's we have made a lot of progress, but at the same time, we have so much more to go. And one more thing, if I may, sorry,
of course.
This conjunction between Mars and the North Node on this Venus star point this year on the U.S. chart is on the descendant in the 7th, and we are moving shortly into, and that means the Venus star point last June too was in the same spot on the U.S. chart in the 7th house. So interesting that this Libra 7th house story is kind of part of this, like you were mentioning, Ray. About the other and relating, and the vulnerability of Aries having to court and shake his tail feathers, like you said. That is kind of, we do need to befriend the dragon, because the dragon is breathing fire, and we need to really make love to that dragon.
Yes.
Particularly.
I like this as part of, like, the word monstrous. And so again, dragon, remembering the monster is us.
Oh yes, like Pogo
Beautiful.
said, fear is I think I've seen it myself. Well, I'm remembering always that Pluto, as it is now at 26.5 degrees, and our natal Pluto for the United States is 1 degree away, 27.32. And in February 2022, it makes its first exact conjunction, and it has 2 more in 2022. And for astrologers, this has been a big march of consciousness to realize that all these incremental steps as we try to regenerate, go into metamorphosis, empower, trash, compost what isn't working. It's a enormous process that we're just experiencing. It's not really something to put on the table and decide we're doing. It's happening. We have no choice. Oh, which reminds me, that means, this is what I wanted to bring up for the United States, because the Venus star points is also a 250-year cycle, meaning it repeats exactly as it was every 250 years. Pluto is 248-year cycle. Well,
Wow.
Yeah. And so the Venus star points are, and the way you find your Venus star point is that before the inception or birth, whether it's a person, a business, a country, whatever, it would be the Venus star point, the Kazemi point between Venus and a planet. So the natal one for the United States is Scorpio. It's 1 degree Scorpio. Well, we are approaching and it's 5 signs. I mean, 5, it's this little army of 5 points. And when they say it's whatever the Venus star point is, that's the head. And then 2 behind it would be arm, leg, and the ones ahead would be arm, leg. So, and they have a relationship. But the point is, we are going to be experiencing this. So the next, in 2023, I believe it is, let me think, I have this
I want to
down.
interject real quick, Sue. I like
Go ahead.
how you're bringing in the star point and its cycle with Pluto. And in particular, you just said that, the United States is about to have its first Pluto return. And so with these Venus star points in Ariel's book, she talks about kind of like the Chinese elements and how one feeds the other. And so she talks about how Gemini feeds Capricorn. And so again, us talking about the variety, the diversity. And Capricorn is very much about definition. And so when we look at, the variety of words and communication within that Gemini, and I think that we are at that precipice. If we talk about this Venus star point, the ruler being Mars on the North Node on the descendant, Gemini descendant of the United States chart, and our Pluto being in Capricorn, how do we use our diversity and our variety to redefine power in America?
Beautiful, right? Yep.
And who has the power? I know Samuel Reynolds, he was on, and that was one of the takeaways that rings a bell. Who has the power? Because it is changing, as now everybody can vote. Well, citizenship has included women. It's included Blacks, thankfully. So yes, who has that's interesting thought.
Another interesting thing of I love discovering these little, zaps in the charts. But last year's Venus star point chart, in addition to all these other great, connections, activations, Jupiter was at 26 degrees Capricorn last June 3rd. And Pluto is presently at 26 degrees Capricorn. They're actually 3 arc minutes apart. This Venus star point and last year's Venus star point, Pluto is right on last year's Jupiter. So that story, and Jupiter, of course, rules the South Node that we're in right now too. And, the whole Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction from last January and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's so fun to see the web of the story and what's really stands out. Yeah.
Changing our belief patterns, really seriously. And that's so beautiful how astrology indicates that, like that observation. Right. Yeah. That
really digging out to the depths of what we believe in and what is really the truth.
Yeah, through all the experiences, through all the different incremental moments that we keep peering at like a spyglass into time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a microscope.
Yeah.
Boy,
that gets some good visuals going.
And again, I think as far as like the parallels for the US chart, but even just in astrology itself and the astrological community, and this being a language, how do we honor the different dialects of astrology, the different techniques? And just like our external political environment, the internal community can become just as polarized and just as defensive, or having the camps of this is the only way to do astrology. I mean, I know for me, it's a big part of, my mission in this world is just to how do we sit with the entire spectrum of this study and honor it?
How do we hold space for it all? Yeah.
Yeah. And that parallels a bit my own to get beyond the cliches. And it's not that astrology intends to have cliches, but yet people seem to quickly go to so many little takeaways that are only a little fragment, because I'm realizing people see the shadow side and then critique the whole. Tend to, and I'm keeping away from generalizations, right? That Jupiter because it's not all, but to be inclusive, in other words. Or what was the other thing that Alan Clay says? Think so quick. It's it's the embracing, this whole idea of embracing the many, it starts with a P, and that's the problem. I can't think of it. I think it does. But at any rate, the whole idea too of inclusiveness, but in a different way, of not polarity.
Well, yeah, Clay, Clay, Sue. The cliches is something that is just, I've noticed it for years, and it's, kind of irks me a little, makes me kind of cringe and crawl. Like, nah, you're going to transform yourself. It's like, but anyway, without being like you said, going down the negative, the inclusiveness and bringing that together, this has definitely become a major polar issue amongst especially organizations. And being a board member of OPA, and we're not the only organization that is catching, some stray people who are more than stray, frankly, but definitely there are people who are speaking out against, in a way, to the organizations and how they aren't being inclusive enough. I would like to just speak for that and say that we are totally open to anyone being a part of our organization, and we would like to see more diversity and inclusion amongst the entire community as much as possible. So bring it on, and let's all let's work this out and hold space for one another, everyone, one and all.
There is real hope. This is a great way, as we have our last 3 minutes or so, and by that, the music will begin, but we have about half a minute, so we don't have to just sign right off. But I am thinking that I noticed with solar arcs, and I know you're both familiar with that, and folks, I've mentioned this before, but it's a timing mechanism of a degree a year, part of astrology, but it has interesting insights. So going to the United States one again, our natal Pluto that we're talking about getting this transiting return, 248 cycle. As far as solar arcs, every 30 years it goes into the next sign, just shifted in August from Virgo to Libra, which is so fascinating. So how we're going to transform is through relationships, which makes me feel that I think both of you might have, well, no, you don't, Ray. But for those that have Pluto in Libra, it's going to bring their persona of experience very powerfully as leaderships. Plus our moon in December, solar arc moon, not to be confused with the progressive, went from Libra. So we were all involved with partnerships all the time, but from a moon standpoint of like security and what the moon wants, to Scorpio. So we are.
Yeah, those are big shifts.
Yeah. So, but I think what you're saying about the collaborative possibilities, I know you were saying a lot more, but somehow that's.
Yeah, sorry, I probably got a little Neptunian.
No, I like it. It all feeds. It feeds beautifully because that's communication, right? It's like we're going to get Gemini gives it all out, and somehow you just got to kind of keep weeding through stuff. Yeah,
it's a good man. Gemini to Capricorn. Gemini just says it all. Capricorn helps reduce and define.
Like Tim Gunn says, edit.
Should we put it in a book? Should we put it in a vase? Should we put it, let's see, what shall we do with it? Make it a cornerstone. Yeah, that's what.
But Ray, you were definitely saying that, we need to hold space for all of us, and we need to have a more communication and get to know. I mean, you said it better than I did. I don't want to.
Well, and I think it really comes back to that like radical vulnerability spot, and to kind of bring in some other Aries words is how to deal with our own defensiveness, and our own triggers, and how we do that in, again, a safe space, a loving space, a space where we allow our own vulnerability and the vulnerability of others. And that Gemini quality of how do we actually listen? How do we actually hear without being in that defensive space?
Which could be the Aryan part of that.
And I'm trying to find that word, because you know what? If we can really live in a world that has many multiple possibilities, more possibilities, because right now does have the Piscean energy going. That's part of our seed, rather than try to eliminate. Like we can define this and that to help us move along. And that's so important, I think, in this, is get away from the cliches of whether any of the little trigger points that we have in the debates that polarize people, and use that sense along, like you're saying, with the Gemini feeding, or the Capricorn feeding the Gemini. So next week, I think we're having the Moonbeam team. And tonight, this is the 4th season, and to celebrate, I have both Ray Sapp of the Mountain Astrologer and Jeff Gronlund of OPA, Astrology for the Professional, for Organization of Professional Astrology. And we've been talking about Venus star points and our heartbeat. Gee,
Hey,
my heartbeat.
Sue, congratulations on 4 years.
Yeah.
Woo, thank you. And folks, check out Mountain Astrologer and OPA. You can buy Ariel's
Thank you for
talk.
joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.